friends, this is Karen from Blue Rooster Farm, and today we are getting ready to make our December dish mat of the month. Now, if you're like me, this is a really busy time of year. So I wanted to make this dish mat a little easier as far as not having to do a lot of measuring and cutting and things like that, and just to kind of let you mindlessly sew. So this is a fun one, and I think you're going to like it. All of my dish mats that we have been making, I've tried to incorporate different things into each one and use a little different style, and this one is following that as well. It's something that we haven't done before. Now, on our dish mats, I started last year in February, and I'm going to go ahead and do December's today, and then I'll do one for January. Hopefully. It might be a little late, but it'll be kind of for the winter time anyway, so it can be used throughout the winter. But since we did not get January in, and since I hadn't planned on doing dish mats of the month early on, I'm just going to go ahead and do a January one as well. So we've got two left, this one and another one. So let's see what we're going to need for this dish mat. So the first thing that we always need is a dish mat to make a dish mat. And again, I have a lot of people asking, well, you've already got a dish mat, you know, why are we making a dish mat from a dish mat? Can't we just take fabric and towels and batting? And I say, yes, of course you can. That is perfect. If you want to make a dish mat sandwich, which would be a piece of fabric for the backing, something in the middle for absorbency, you can use old towels, you can use batting, you can use the foam batting. That's probably what they have in here. You can use whatever you want and then work from there. But you know what? These are so cheap. They're already cut. They're already sandwiched. From what I've paid for mine, they're cheaper to make it this way than any other way for me. But definitely use what you have. You can make these with whatever you have on hand. Now, this one says $5.99, but we all know at Hobby Lobby, they're 40 to 50% off all the time. And I got this one at 50% off. So, of course, it would be $3. And you just can't beat $3 for this. And they do have the Christmas ones out now, but they are more expensive. I've noticed the price increase on them. So there were still quite a few fall ones when I was there about a week ago. And this is the weekend before Thanksgiving. So if they have them right now, when this video is being shared, I have a feeling they're going to be really good prices. So I've got my dish mat, and this is a fall one, and I'm going to cover this side today, even though that's awfully cute. And I'm going to use this color because this color coordinates with my fabric, so I'll use this for the back. So then the other thing you're going to need is you're going to need a charm pack. Now, you don't need a whole charm pack. All you're going to need is 15 squares. Unless you want to make a bunch of these, and then you can make a bunch of dish towels with one charm pack. But I'm using Andover Sugarberry, and these fabrics I thought were really pretty. Dark greens, teals, reds, cream, just real pretty fabric. So I picked this up at Missouri Star when we were there at the shop hop, and I think it's a really pretty fabric collection. I always like Andover. Andover's got really pretty collections. You're also going to need a solid. And before I tell you what about this solid, let me show you what we're going to make, okay? So these right here are Wonky Christmas trees. And I thought this would be perfect for Christmas, and I think they're really cute, especially using them in the fabrics that you like. It will really showcase your fabrics. But these have been around for a long time. You can use any size square. You know, it's a mindless sewing. You can cut them any way you want. There's just a couple of things that I'm going to share with you that might help your blocks turn out nice and even, as far as all of them kind of lining up correctly and making sure you don't get your points cut off. But these are fun. And when we put these together, what I've got in mind here, and I just drew this out on my EQ8, and this has the lines in it so you can see the trees really clearly. But I'm thinking of doing a 5x3 patchwork of them, and then we'll put a solid or any color fabric, a border on them. And that way, depending on the size of your dish mat, it can be adjusted really easily. You can reduce the size or enlarge the size of your border. Now, here's what it looks like without the lines. And I'm wanting to show you this. Whoops, it's upside down. Because you can see that some of them get a little lost. And so when we are making these, if you want your trees to stand out, be sure you pick fabrics that contrast each other. And when you do that, your trees are going to stand out better. This right here is pretty light and pretty light. This one is a little trickier to see too. So you can kind of tell, you know, and even that one, it stands out, but you know, it could have been standing out a little more. If you don't mind them fading in together, that's fine. That's fine. But if you want your trees to pop a little bit, we're going to be choosing contrasting colors to make the trees and the background. So just keep that in mind. So what I'm going to do is use this for my tree trunk. And the tree trunk is only a 1-inch square. So you could get by with one of the squares in your charm pack. But I was looking at these, and this one only has a few different colors, about 4 or 5 colors, and I thought my trunks might get a little lost in it. And I kind of like to have something that your eyes can rest on and kind of give it a little bit of order. So I'm just going with a brown. I could have gone with a red, a solid green, a solid tan, a solid cream, a solid aqua. Any of those would have been fine, but I'll just keep it traditional and keep it brown. But again, 1 square will be plenty if you want to use one of your fabric squares. So let's see how these are made. With 2 charm squares, you're going to get 2 blocks. So I'm going to move this out of the way. And the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get my tree trunk cut. And I've just got a fat quarter here, or a partial fat quarter, I guess. And I am just going to take this edge right here. And I'm not even going to press it. Usually I press, but I'm not even going to press it. And I'm going to cut a 1-inch strip. 1 inch. And then I am going to take this, and let's see, this is the open part. And since it's doubled up here, I am just going to take, I'll just use a smaller ruler here. And I'm going to cut 1-inch squares with it. So I'm just going to use the cut edge, and this is the folded edge over here, and I can get 2 at a time doing this, and I'm going to need 15. The nice thing about this dish mat and this block is you can actually make any size blocks. You'll just have fewer blocks if you make them bigger. And I don't know, you can make them smaller. It gets a little trickier as they get smaller because you have to have your seam allowance and you don't want to cut off your points. But you can give it a try. I've only done 5-inch squares. So if you want to try smaller ones, take some scrap fabric and try this method with it. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 10, 11, 12. And I believe we are going to amazingly have 15 right here. Okay, I've got my 15 pieces for my trunk. Then I'm going to open up my fabric, and I am going to decide what fabrics I want to use. Now, I want some lights because I like the lights for contrast. So I'm going to pull my lights out here. I believe those are lights. These are kind of mediums. These are my reds, and all of those are pretty dark. Now I have teals. I just have a couple of teals or mints. I'm not sure exactly what color that is. I have a light green, and I have a dark green. And that would be considered, I'm going to call that a medium just because it's a little crazy on the eyes. That's a dark, light green, light green, light green, and that's getting close to a medium. I'm going to put it here for now. I could use it, but I think I've got plenty of the greens. We'll see. Okay, so it looks like I have 2 dark greens, 2 teals, and I've got plenty, 3, 4, 5 light greens. So I'm going to get 8 colors. We're going to have to make 16 because we make 2 at a time. So I'm going to take 8 dark colors, and I'm going to take 8 lights. Okay, so let's see. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to do 2 of each. That one. That one. And if I mess up on one, I've got plenty of backup. And I think this is going to look pretty. Okay, set those aside. Now let's get 8 lights. All right, so we have 8 of the lighter colors and 8 of the darker colors. Now you can make these 2 at a time, but I like to go ahead and make 3 or 4 at a time. It's going to be, since we're only using 15, it's going to be a little bit more of the same shape of a tree, but I think I'll do 3 at a time. That way we'll do 3, 3, and 2 at a time. That way we can kind of get a variation of colors, and we won't be pairing the same fabrics up with each other twice, just to mix it up a little bit. But if you want to just do 2 at a time, and then you'll have 2 that are just the opposites, that's fine. And there's no problem with this at all. I'm just trying to kind of spread my colors out a little bit. So let's see. I've got my 3 darks, and I'm going to go ahead and between them, just so it's easier for me. Do it like, whoops, like that. So I should have 6 pieces of fabric. 2, 4, and 6. And then just line them up nice and neat. Okay. Try to get them even. It doesn't have to be perfect. Then you take a ruler, and we're going to take off 1 inch of the bottom. And that inch is going to be this section right here where the trunk is. And I like that bottom to be pretty straight. Okay, so 1 inch. And since this has those little snipped edges, I'm going to go to the valley to measure. That way I'll have plenty. Now, if you're using a larger square, this can be larger. So it just is kind of in the ratio of the size. So let me set that aside. So these are the space underneath our tree, okay? And then we have our trunks over there. Now what we're going to do, and I like to use my mat here, and if I just put it right on a line and right where these lines are here, that helps me. Now when we cut this, what we're going to do is we're going to do a cut this way and we're going to do a cut this way. We don't use any templates and we don't care if they're a little wonky. The only thing we care about here is that it's at least 1/2 of an inch away from this edge. If you get it closer than 1/2 of an inch, you have a risk of losing your point of your tree down here. Up here, I don't like to meet them directly at the same spot. I like to meet where my cuts intersect a little bit below it at least. You can definitely make a short tree and you can cut way down here, and we'll do a couple of those if you'd like. But let's just do one here. So all you do is take your straight edge. I'm looking at my mat and I'm going in 1/2 of an inch, and this is 1/2 of an inch, this line right here. So I can kind of keep my eye on that right there. And that's where my ruler, where it hits that 1 inch mark, is going to stay this side of it. Then I can go anywhere up here. It doesn't matter. You can go in the middle. If you want your tree leaning to the side, make it go farther this way. We'll just do something kind of wonky. So I'm going to do over here. And this one's going to be kind of our short one. So that way we'll get an idea of what a wonky shorter tree looks like. So this right here is our middle. And I've got a glare there. This right here is the middle of our block, and I'm moving it over here, and that is just fine. So right there, let's cut it. And just be sure you cut all through the thicknesses. And if you're not able to cut all of those at the same time, just work with 2 at a time, just 2 fabrics or 2 colors. Okay, now I am going to take this and I am going to go over here, and I think I'm going to go further in this time because I'm making this just a crazy tree. And then I'm going to go below about 3/4 of an inch below, just making it kind of silly. Now keep an eye on the size of your tree because you're going to still have a 1/4 inch all around. So this is going to be pretty tiny right here. So if you don't want it that tiny, just be sure you cut it different. So then we're going to do this. Okay. Now we have 3 stacks. So I can take this and I can move that top one onto the bottom, and let's see if these make decent looking blocks. There's one. Now you can take a look at all of your blocks and you can decide if there's something you want to change. Now, as you see, there's none of these on here that are inverses. That means the same fabrics used twice like this. They are all 6 different. So this one stands out fine. That one's pretty good. I think they look pretty good just looking at the camera lens. This one would be the one that would have the most issues, I think. So maybe I will take this one. Let's see if this makes a difference. That one stands out a little bit more. Oh, but it's the inverse of this one. I don't want that. We're going to keep it the way it was. And you can't use another batch from another cut because they're going to be all cut differently. So this is why we cut 6 fabrics at a time here. So that looks good. On our piece of fabric that is for the base, I'm just going to fold it. It doesn't have to be exact. Fold it, kind of get an idea of where the center is, right in there somewhere. Get my ruler, and just as long as it's straight up and down. I just line it up on a line right here, cut. Again, it doesn't have to be right exactly in the middle because this piece is going to be too long and we're going to be trimming it down anyway. So here are the pieces that are going to go under the tree. And I just match them up with that outside fabric. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is, let's just do this one right here. I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I am going to sew this. And what I look at is I'm going to take this one right here because this is going to equally match, and I don't really think it makes any difference. But when let me turn it this way, when I lay this on here, I just match those corners. Now you can put a couple pins in it, and I do want to tell you now, this is the bias cut, and what that means is now this is really stretchy, and you don't want to be pulling on it. You don't want to warp them. Even though these are wonky trees, you don't want your blocks buckling up. So just be careful. We've got these cut on the bias. So now I'm going to go to my sewing machine, and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch all the way across. All right, there is my piece right there, and I just pressed it toward the background. And again, be real careful when you're pressing. Just lay it flat. Don't pull on it. You don't want to get it out of shape. Okay, now we're going to take this piece, and this one is going to be overlapping this red here, but we are just going to line it up. And if you wanted to, you can move this one up a little higher, and just be careful that you have this top fine. But just lay it across there. It is going to be longer than this block just because you've already put a seam in it. So we're going to flip it back, and we are going to make sure that point goes across and at least touches up here. And this point might hang down a little bit. That's okay. If you want to pull this one all the way up, that's fine. So now we're going to sew a 1/4 inch away from that edge. And there we have the other side sewn on. And we have these little hangover pieces. So at this point, if you'd like to, you can trim and just line it up with the Christmas tree. If those don't bother you when you're sewing, you can leave them and trim them off after it's sewn. I'll just go ahead and do it now. That way it'll be a little easier. So there we have it. Now we need to do our tree's trunk. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my trunk fabric, put it right sides together if it has 2 sides. Mine doesn't. And so a 1/4 inch away from it on this edge. Then we're going to open it up. We're going to lay this one on it, and we're going to sew a 1/4 inch. Excuse me, I've got to grab hold of that. 1/4 inch from this edge. And when we open it up, it's going to be a long strip. And there we have our trunk. Now, what I do is I try to center it up with my tree. It doesn't have to be. If we're making these wonky, it doesn't have to be, but I just kind of like it when it's kind of centered up. And so when I do that, I just eyeball it and then flip it so it's right sides together, and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch from that edge. And of course we have this extra fabric here, and that's fine. All right, there we have our block. And for pressing, since we are going to be trimming these up to 4 inches, and sometimes we're going to be taking off a little at the bottom, and sometimes we're not, our seams aren't necessarily going to be matching with the other blocks. They might come close, they might be off. I am going to go ahead and open up all of my seams and press them. And that's because that way it'll be thinned down, and depending on where the other seams are, it won't be really bulky if we have 2 of them going the same direction and they're right on top of each other. So I'm going to do that with all of my blocks. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go ahead and get these 5 done, and then I'll bring you back and we're going to cut another one. All right, I want to bring you back here for just a minute. I'm just working on those 5. And I do know that I have lots of brand new quilters who are really appreciative of all of the suggestions and stuff. And there are people also on here that have been quilting for years. But I'm going to speak right now to those of you who are newer to sewing. On this, I want to make sure I made this clear a while ago. Once you have your first one sewn on, your first side, when you are getting ready to sew this one on, this length right here is longer than this length. But you want to have any extra hanging off up here, because as you can see, we're getting these little hangovers down here, and we're going to get that over here too probably. But we want to try to conserve as much of our fabric as we can, because I'm having us cut these at 4 inches, and it's going to be a really tight cut. And some of you might not be able to make a 4-inch block. You might have to cut it down to 3 3/4, 3 7/8, just to get it to fit and to get it to square. But make sure you let this hang over. If you don't let it hang over, what's going to happen is once you have your 1/4 inch seam here, this one right here is going to drop down pretty low. And when it drops down pretty low, you're going to have to trim all of that off. So here I let them overhang up here, and you can see that this side is just a little taller, and that's good. I have plenty of extra down here, but I'm trying to conserve the fabric so we can get 4 inches out of this. And so just let this hang over, match this point right here with this point, and then let the extras hang over at the top. And then when you do your 1/4 inch, this might be a little taller on this side, but that's good. We'll take it. We just don't need it down here. And here we have all of those blocks finished. And of course, they are not trimmed up yet. We'll do that at the end. But I did press, and again, I pressed toward the background, and the bottom seam is open. But they are all pretty much identical. And I think they're looking really cute. Now let's take and make another looking one, because right now these are all identical. We don't want them to be all identical. So let's just make 2 different versions this time. So let me get my fabric here. Line it up. So this time I'm just using 2 darks and 2 lights. If you are wanting to make a perfect looking tree, if you are a person that can't handle the wonkiness and you want to make a perfect looking tree, we'll do one of those. If you want all your trees to look exactly alike and you want them to look perfect, let's do that. So first of all, let's go ahead and trim 1 inch off the bottom so we can have our bottom fabric. And then I just go in the ditch part of those pinked edges. Okay, and that's going to be our bottom piece. And again, just kind of fold it a little bit. Get a general area as to where, is a smaller, as to where that center is. As long as it's straight up and down, that's all I care. Put those 2 aside. Now we're going to take this right here, and I'm going to use the lines of my cutting mat again, and I am just lining them up here and here and on a straight edge. Okay, so the middle of this is right here. Maybe I ought to get a pointer here. Here's the middle right here. Okay, 1/2 inch, we need to go over at least 1/2 inch, is right here and right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my straight edge and I'm going to put the edge of it right here where the fabric meets the half inch mark. And I'm going to put my ruler right here where the fabric is 1/4 inch away from the center. So here's the center line right here. Here is the line that's 1/4 inch away, and I'm going to go ahead and mark 1/4 inch away over here too. So the center, 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch. And so I'm going to go from the half inch to the line that I marked that's on this side of my center line. And I'm going to cut that. Okay, and then let's move that out of the way. Then I'm going to go over here, and I actually cut my mark off, so I won't use that. But I'm going to go over here and find my half inch mark over here. And this time I am going to, because my mat was here earlier, let me just put this here. Here is where that half inch line is. It's this one right here. I am just going to match it up right there. Half inch on that line, or I'm sorry, 1/4 inch away from the center on that line, and 1/2 inch on that line. And cut right here. Now, when we do that, this should be an equilateral triangle where all sides are 4 inches. Let's check it out and see. 4 inches, 4 inches, 4 inches. So if you need a perfect Christmas tree, you can still do this. And then of course you'll take your pieces. I just put the top one that was on top at the bottom, and that way it will mix them just perfectly. Because remember, I layered them lights and darks. I'm leaving myself some room down here because I'm going to show you something. And those look like they are all nice and contrasting, and the tree stands out. Okay, so if you want to do this method and you want to do it where you don't have to do all that measurement all the time, you can take the cardstock or cut yourself a 5-inch piece of paper or cardstock or anything. But this is just the card that comes in the back of your charm pack. And it should be 5 inches by 5 inches. Yep, that is. And so just take your inch off the bottom. Okay. And now this is the fabric size that we normally use. And let me move this. Get this nice and centered for you. So what we're going to do is place this on our lines again. And this time I am just going to put a mark, and I can use a Sharpie. So here is our halfway mark right there. I'm going to go 1/4 inch from it on this side, 1/4 inch from it on this side. Then I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go 1/2 inch from this edge and 1/2 inch from this edge. Now with some scissors, you can just kind of make take a little notch out of it, right where that point is. So you can see those notches. Okay, those are just places to put your pencil. So if you have a piece of fabric and you're going to cut the 1 inch off the bottom for all of them, then what you will do is you will just line that up. Take a pen, or this is just a friction pen, and make little marks where that is. And then of course just draw your lines. and you can do that line. And I'm not trying to do too much of a dark line here. There you go. And there you go. So what you're going to do is you're going to just take your stack of fabrics, and we'll just pretend like this is our stack of fabrics. Lay the one on the top. You don't even really have to draw the lines. Lay the one on the top and then just cut on those lines. Now remember to, before you cut on one of these lines, pull the fabric away so that you don't cut that inside point out. I think it's going to be okay if that does accidentally get cut out. I think that's small enough that your 1/4 inch seam allowance will take in that. But when you cut, remember, we cut one direction, pulled this away, then cut this. So you don't want to cut without moving the edge away. And cut your pieces, and you're going to have all perfect equilateral Christmas trees. So yours will not be wonky, but that is just for those people who just can't handle the wonkiness. So I'm going to get these sewn up. I'm going to cut the rest of them. And when I come back, I'll have them all sewn together, and I'll show you how we square them up. All right, and here is our fabric. We are all set, ready to square these up. I've got them all pressed. Again, I pressed away from the Christmas tree, and then I opened up the bottom seam, and that worked well. Now, I'm going to try to get 4 inches out of this block, and it should work. I have a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance, and that just means that it is just slightly like a thread's thickness smaller than a 1/4 inch. And so that way my blocks are just a thread's thickness wider and just gives me a little bit of wiggle room. I usually use a scant 1/4 inch unless I'm really working with a small block that I really need to be accurate with, and then it's right on a 1/4 inch. So when I lay this ruler, and I'm just using a 4.5 inch square ruler because I'm thinking of trimming these to 4 inches. You can use any size ruler, but I find that the smaller ones, as long as they're larger than what I'm trimming it down to, are just easier to handle. So I'm fine here, I'm fine this way. Now what I want to be careful about is I don't want to have less than a 1/4 inch up here of this red fabric past this point. If I have less than a 1/4 inch, that means when I sew my seam, I'm going to cut that tip right off. I have to have at least a 1/4 inch above that point. Down here, this right now is 3/4 of an inch wide. And if I cut too much off, I have a risk of losing my tree trunk altogether in a seam allowance. So if I ended up cutting it right here, and that's taking a 1/4 inch off, when I sew my 1/4 inch seam to sew them together, I am just about taking that whole block, and I only see just a tiny, tiny piece of that tree trunk. And so that's something I need to be aware of. I try to take as little as I can off of this. And if I can, I take more up here. So let me lay this on here. I've got my ones right here. And I'm just laying it on here and making sure I have a little bit of fabric overhanging or right up next to the edge. And I don't have hardly any overhanging over here just because it is just about 4 inches right there. Now I do have the pinked edges, and I am going all the way to the tips of those points. And it looks like I'm overhanging about a 1/4 inch over here, so that's good. But I don't want to take a 1/4 inch off. I'd rather take a 1/4 inch off the top. So I'm going to slide this down to where I'm just taking off a little bit down here just to make it nice and straight. And the majority of it's coming off up here because I've got a nice big gap right there. And I think I've got it lined up well enough. Now, if you are a hair off and you don't have quite enough fabric underneath there, it should still work. You're going to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so you can fudge a little bit there. And so I've just taken those little tiny slivers off the side, picking up my ruler, and you can see I didn't even get the pinked edges off, and it's okay. I'm taking the corner, the top right corner, flipping it all the way to the bottom left. Now these two edges are the edges I need to trim. These two should be nice and straight. So I lay these two on the 4-inch line, just like that. And now I can see that I have just a tiny bit there and a tiny bit here. Now, if you find when you are trimming your blocks that you don't have 4 inches and it's quite a ways away from 4 inches, go ahead and trim yours down to 3 3/4 inches. That's fine. If you can, try to make 3 7/8, and that would be even better. But if you can get 4 inches out of them, try to do that. So there's one block nice and square. All right, let's trim this one up. This one is a little bit of a smaller tree. I am going to look and see if it's 4 inches wide, and it is just barely. I have a little bit up here and a little bit down there. And so I am just going to see if I can just trim off what we have around there. And there we go. There's another one. So these should be matching up, and they do. They're looking awfully cute. Let me find one of my crooked ones right here. And there's another one. So as you see, these are coming together really nicely. Now, when we lay these out, you may want to do where you have a dark background, light background, dark background. You can do that, or you can just randomly place them. So I'm going to go ahead and get 15 of them trimmed down, the 15 that I want to use, and I will be right back. All right, so I have them all trimmed up, and I went ahead and laid them out, and I did decide to go ahead and do dark, light backgrounds, and just tried to get my colors all spread out. And I think this is fine, just like this. So lay yours out the way you like it. So what we're going to do now is we are going to take and we're going to sew rows like this. So I'm going to sew this right here, right sides together, 1/4 inch away. Then I'll flip it back and I'll do this bottom one right here, 1/4 inch away. So we'll have a strip right here. So we'll end up having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 strips when I come back. I'll be right back. I now have all of my trees sewn in columns, and we're ready to put them onto our dish mat. So I'm going to bring my dish mat right over here. And I am going to remove the tag. And I do have a tag that I'm going to be putting on here. Let's see if I have it right here. Yeah, I'm going to be using that one. Merry Christmas, and it's got the truck with the Christmas trees in it. So this is going to be the back because I think this color will look really nice with that. So I'm going to be putting the trees on this side. Okay, so here is our mat. Now what we're going to do is we're going to mark this so that we can make sure this is kind of centered. It doesn't have to be perfect, but we don't want it to be way off. So I'm going to mark, first of all, the center. And I'm just going to fold it in half. And then put a mark right there. And put a mark right there. Then we're going to do the same thing going this way. That way we'll have the center of our mat marked on the rows and the columns. Then we're going to get a straight edge and we're going to go ahead and make a line. So we'll just match up those 2 dots. And again, you can use a pencil or a light pen. This is going to be covered up. You don't want to use anything that will show through. Okay. Mine is a friction pen, so it will disappear with heat. Once you have your dish mat with the vertical line and the horizontal line, both of them centered, we are ready to lay our first strip. And I am just going to be taking this middle strip right here, and it is going to be directly placed right in the center of this line. So we need to put a fold there and a fold there. So we're just folding it in half and finding the center point. Then we need to do it the other direction. And with our fingernails, we can nicely press that. You can take it to the iron, or you could use a pencil or something and mark it. But the fingernail press works just fine. Now I'm just going to take where those creases are and match them up to where the lines are, and then just kind of lay it nice and straight. Okay. Now when I pressed these, I pressed one going, let's see, which way did this one go? Once I sewed all 3 blocks together, I pressed those seams going down. Then these were pressed up. This one was pressed down, up and down. So when I add my next strip, our seams should nest. And if I lay those seams right on top of each other, and those are the block seams, they should nest really nicely. And that way we'll have a nice intersection where they'll be going right together. So let me grab a pin. And we are going to pin these in place. We're going to match the top corner. And we're going to match the bottom corner. Then we're going to match those seams. And they should be where they lay right on top of each other with the seams going opposite directions. And just put a pin right there where they are. Same thing here. Perfect. Now I'm going to my sewing machine, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch from this edge all the way down. And I'm going to make sure I start a little ways on the mat up here and then sew all the way down. And that's just to make sure it's secured. And I'll sew just a little ways off right over here. And I'll bring you back. And here we have it. And we've just got it all sewn together. Just ran that stitch right there. And now I'm just opening it up nice and flat. You want to make sure that your seams match. That will make it look really nice, and those do. And as you can see, I have not cut off any points just yet. I had plenty of room. This one was the closest so far, but I had a little bit more than a 1/4 inch up there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add our next row. But before we do that, for those of you who have not made a dish mat or seen my videos before, one thing when you're sewing on this fabric, you might want to lengthen your stitch length, because the back stuff here sometimes drags a little bit on your base. And so if you lengthen that stitch length, it'll pull it a little bit better and it'll look nicer. Also, you can use a walking foot. A walking foot works really well too, but I'm just using my regular foot. Okay, so now we're going to take our next piece. So it's this one right here. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to lay it right here next to this one. And this is called Quilt-As-You-Go because we're actually quilting it to the mat itself. And so we're just going to lay that where the tops match. and where the seams match again. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch away. Now, after I finish with that one, what I'm going to do is come over here and start going from this side. So I will take this next row, and I could even put it on right now, and that way I don't have to get up and put it on, and just attach this one right here. And what I will do is I will sew a 1/4 inch away from this edge too. And then I will come back and I will grab that last piece and I will add it to the end over here. And when I bring you back, I'll have all 5 strips sewn on. And now I have all of them down, and it looks really nice on the back too. You don't see your thread, it gets stuck deep inside, but you can just see the texture that it makes. So I like that. And that was white thread, so you don't even see the white thread. So now we just need to lay this out flat again like this. And so now we have about a 1.5, 1.25 inch border all around, somewhere around there. And so we can take like a jelly roll strip or any kind of, we can cut our own. If you cut your own, I would probably cut, I'm going to go ahead and use 2.5 inches, just because once you get your seam on, you're going to lose about 1/2 inch. And so just to give it enough to go all the way over the edge. So on mine, I'm just going to use 2.5 inch strips. And I was trying to figure out what kind of fabric would be pretty. Now you can do more than one border. If you wanted to do 2 little thin borders, you could. I think it may make it look too busy though. So I think I'm just going to do 1 border. Now, if your blocks were smaller, if you had to go to 3 3/4, you may have been able to get 4 blocks going up and down or 6 blocks going this way, and you may not have much of a border needed. So just depending on the size you ended up cutting your blocks down. But I think I am going to be putting a border on, and I have some fabric here. It was a little bit of a jelly roll, and so I'm kind of trying to decide the fabric that I want to go with. This was some candy canes, and this is a really pretty fabric that would go along with it too. I kind of like that. Maybe something like this and then a darker binding on it. So I'm going to pick out what I'm going to go with. And what we're going to do is we're going to be doing strips. So I'm going to cut a strip that is as long as this section and just a little bit longer. So let's see what that measures on mine. And you'll want to measure yours. So mine measures about 11 inches. So I'll probably cut like 11.5 inch strip. And so let's just do that. Let me cut 11.5 inch strip because I think I'm going to go with this. And we're actually going to need 2 11.5 inch strips since we're going to put one on both sides. So I'm just going to keep this folded. And if you need to check and make sure that's the size that you have on the other side too, let's do just to be sure. Because sometimes, like in the big quilts, yep, that should cover both of them. Just like in big quilts, sometimes the sides don't always measure exactly the same. So I'm just going to trim off the selvage right here. And this fabric is some that I had, and it's from Urban Chicks. It's the, I believe, Holly Jolly from quite some time ago. And I found it in a Moda scrap bag. They have the strips that are scrap bags. And so I thought it's awfully cute. I'll get that. So we said 11.5 inches. So I'm just measuring 11.5 there. to here. And I do have more than one strip of this. You will need more than one strip. I have a couple. I probably have 3 or 4 actually. So I'm going to take these 2 that I measured out, and we are going to put one right here, and I'll pin it just like we did when we were attaching the strips together, and then one right sides together, just like that. So I'm going to sew 1/4 inch away from those edges, and I'll bring you right back. And those 2 sides are sewn down, and they just overlap just a little bit, which is fine. That'll be nice to have that little bit of extra. Now we can just take, let's see what we have left on this one right here. This one may be enough for one side. Oh, just a little short, darn it. Okay, so we'll take this right here, and all we need to do is go from one edge of this mat to the other, and it looks like if I just take half of this strip of jelly roll, it will be the perfect size. So I've got one for the top and one for the bottom. Just like that. And you don't have to match them up necessarily to the ends of your fabric pieces here. Just make sure they're coming to the end and edges of your mat. And we're just going to sew 1/4 inch away from that edge and 1/4 inch away from this edge. And I'll bring you right back. And we have our top and our bottom section on, and I just took a hot iron, and it's fine to use on these. They're okay. You don't have to hold the iron on forever to burn it or melt it, but it'll do a nice job at pressing. I just went ahead and pressed it so that we wouldn't have any pleats in there, and I went ahead and pressed over here, because what I'm going to do now is I am going to put a couple of pins in it right here. Well, actually, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to trim it up. And I'm also going to cut the threads off the back here. Okay, in order to trim this up, all we're going to do is take a straight edge, and we're just going to lay it right on top of our mat. And if you cut your mat, that's okay, no big deal. But just cut it off right there at the mat. And you will probably have to push fairly hard on your ruler just because it's quite thick here. If you have a larger blade, I forget what size is it, a 60, that's the larger one, that would work. But these 45 just barely have the I guess it's the radius to trim that. So let's go ahead and do the same thing here. Just match up with your ruler and give it a trim. Oops, and I could tell I wasn't quite cutting that. And you can see that blue fluff, that is just the mat. That stuff right there. And we're going to do this edge the same way and the bottom edge. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to just do a basting stitch all along the outside edge, and that is just to hold everything in place while we put the binding on. We don't want the top to flip back and get messed up or even pucker on us, so we'll just bind it all around the outside edge. I would imagine you could also probably take a little bit of a glue stick or some Elmer's washable glue and just put a little glue on it too. But I'm just going to use a basting stitch. And a basting stitch is just a larger stitch length. And that way, if you need to remove it, for instance, if it hangs out past your binding and you need to remove it, it's real easy to remove. All right, so let's get that fluff out of the way. So I'm going to go to my sewing machine and just really close to the edge, like 1/8 of an inch away from my edge, I am going to put a big basting stitch, and I'll bring you right back. And there I have my basting stitch all the way around. And so that will help make binding much easier. And it's looking so cute. I just love it. Just absolutely love it. It's quite busy, but I think it just is really, the colors and everything, it's just really cute. I was debating at first whether or not to use a solid for the border, but I really like this print. I think it makes it look really Christmassy. So I'm really pleased with it so far. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick out some of my strips here to make a binding. And I'm kind of thinking this is probably what I will use unless I find something different. It's either going to be red or it's going to be green. So I'm not sure which of these colors I'll go with, but probably one of them, a dark green or a dark red. I think those would look really nice on it. But I guess even this color would look nice too. I'll look and see. This one I have available, so we'll see if that one gets used. But I will bring you back when I get it all finished. If you don't know how to bind one of these with the sewing machine, I do have a tutorial on my channel, and I will put a link up to it right here, and it'll be found in the description box, and it shows you exactly how to do a simple binding on a small object or a quilt. It just walks you right through how to bind with the sewing machine. And so we don't have to do any hand stitching on this. This is going to be completely done on the sewing machine. So if you need to check that video out, I'll have a link in the description box below. But I will bring you back in just 1 second. Okay guys, I've got it all finished, but I changed my mind on the binding. Here's what I went for. I hope you like it as much as I do. What do you think? Isn't that adorable? I forgot I had this fabric, and I looked in there in my cabinet, and it's like, that is perfect. It looks so vintagey, I think. I love the colors. I love the way it turned out. I hope you like it too. This was a really fun sew, and you know, the wonkier the better. I think those turned out great. And you know, once these are wonky, if you get anything else wonky, it just looks like it's meant to be wonky. So this is a great dish mat for beginners because it's so forgiving, very forgiving. I am going to be putting this in my kitchen after this weekend, once I get the house decorated, and I'm really looking forward to using it. I'd love to see yours if you decide to make one. I'd love to see this in different colorways and different fabrics. So if you make one and you are on Instagram, please be sure to put a picture on Instagram, tag @BlueRoosterFarm23, and let all of us see what yours look like. It's so much fun to see different ideas, different patterns in different fabrics. So this was a lot of fun. I hope you enjoy it too. And I hope that if you are not a subscriber, you will consider subscribing. That would help my channel out a lot. Also, don't forget to like and share, because liking and sharing and commenting really helps the algorithms for my channel. I hope to see you back here soon, and I hope you have a really happy Thanksgiving. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.